I never used to believe in ghosts. And then this happened. After my mother's passing, I moved back to my hometown to support my father, who had health issues of his own. Janitorial work being the only work I'd ever done since graduating from high school, there was no choice as to what job I would pick up while back home. I considered myself lucky to have found a cleaning job at a nursery school about a 30-minute drive from my home. The previous janitor, as heard in the interview, suddenly quit a week previously, citing immediate health concerns. Over the next week of working there, I got a pretty concrete idea as to what caused those immediate health concerns. Things started getting weird on the second or third day that I had started working there. It was at night, about 2 hours after the preschool had closed. Around 8 p.m. it was. I was mopping the floors on the first floor near the reception area when the intercom from the front gate rang. I was the only person in the building at that hour, so I had to answer it. I picked up after a few rings and I heard only static. I looked out the reception office window, which looks out onto the car park and the front gate, but nobody was out there. So I decided to walk out and take a closer look in case they hadn't heard me answer or something. Not a soul was around. At the time, I put it down to some kids playing knock and run or faulty wiring. The very next night, I had another late night intercom call come through. This time, I was on the third level mopping the corridor. The phone in the corridor rang. The weird thing was that only that particular phone rang, the one closest to me. I couldn't hear any others ringing. This is a detail that I overlooked at the time. I just assumed that all the phones in the building were connected to the reception area and the front gate, and they would automatically be diverted to where the sensors picked up activity in the building, similar to the lights and the heating. But same as the night before, I was met with only static. And then as I removed the phone from my ear to hang up, I heard a voice. A woman's voice. It sounded very far away. I couldn't get what she was saying at first, so I asked her to repeat it. "Is my son there?" She said slowly. Slower than was necessary, I felt. Again, it sounded like the person on the other end was underwater. "The nursery shuts down at 6 p.m., ma'am. There were no kids here when it did," I replied. No answer from her end, just a rise in the static. Receiver still in hand, I looked out the corridor window on the opposite side, the one that looks directly over the car park. "Excuse me, ma'am. I'm having trouble hearing you." There was no one at the gate. And then her voice through the phone again. "Is my son there?" I strained to look at the gate, almost willing someone to materialize there just so I wasn't looking at a space where there should have been a person that I was talking to. "Ma'am, I can't hear..." And then the phone went to static again. At the time, honestly, I didn't know what to make of it. I hadn't imagined the voice, that's for sure. It was clear as day. I just shrugged it off. Weird people everywhere in this world. And then I heard the unmistakable sound of bare feet running on hardwood flooring. The feet were light and quick. Children's feet. They came from the 4-year-old's room and out into the stairwell where they stopped. "Hello?" I called out to the empty corridor. No response. Whoever it was, they were waiting in the stairwell, just behind the corner. I took a few steps towards the stairwell off to the side of the corridor. And then the footsteps sounded again. This time running down the stairs before fading out of earshot entirely. Someone, a child, ran out from the 4-year-old's room on the 3rd floor, hid in the stairwell, waited, and then when I approached, ran down to another floor. That is what happened. I swear by that. I called out again and I made after the child. How could they have overlooked a child left here past 6 o'clock? Had it been hiding somewhere in the room this whole time? How come the sensor lights didn't turn on? These questions raced through my mind as I took pursuit of the child. The 2nd floor was silent. And what's more, none of the lights had been activated by the motion sensor until I arrived there. The same went for the stairwell. I checked in both of the rooms, but there was no sign of the child. And then, as I was walking back out into the stairwell, I heard one of the faucets in the toilets turn on. I say turned on, but it was more like wrenched full bore. There were no lights from the toilet area either. The lights turned on when I entered the toilets to reveal an empty room. The tap had been turned on with such force that I had to strain to turn it off. No chance in hell a child could have done that. I called the headmaster using the phone in the reception office, and I told him that I had heard a child running about the 3rd and 2nd floors. I didn't mention the faucet in the toilet, and that the sensor lights were unable to pick up any movement. Well, as I expected, my story was met with disbelief. I was asked, "Are you sure?" 3 times. I told him that I was, just telling him what I heard and that I didn't actually see anything. He told me to leave and that he would send somebody over at once to double check, and also check the lighting system. I offered to wait in case the child showed itself again, but I was refused. I collected my equipment from the 3rd floor, put it in the janitor's closet, and I locked the building for the night. The next day, the headmaster called me into his office. He told me that after a thorough search of the entire building and the grounds, there was no trace of any child. He added that the intercom and lighting systems were in working order. The building was nearly 30 years old, he said. A building of its age is prone to making noises at all hours. Just in the daytime, they aren't as noticeable. There was something in his face, like concern. Not at the possibility that there were a child in the building alone after dark, but that his new janitor from out of town might be insane. Even if there were a possibility that the noises I mistook for footsteps were actually the aches and creaks of an aging building, there was no imagining the tap that turned itself on with such force that I had trouble turning it back off. That was not a symptom of an old building. Those few happenings were just the start, however. That night, there was an incident. I use the word incident because I can't think of another name. But a spiritualist might use the word manifestation. It was around 9 p.m. I was on the 1st floor reception area filling out the daily sheet ready to leave for the day. And then I heard the sound of something bouncing, like a large rubber ball. It was getting closer and it was coming from the stairwell. A yellow ball bounced down the stairs and out into the 1st floor. Its bouncing subsided and it rolled straight at me. It stopped about an inch from my foot, but it was the way that it stopped. It didn't stop for lack of forward momentum. It stopped abruptly, as if stopped by a hidden hand. It took me probably longer than it should have to process just what had happened. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to bend down and pick the ball up. I couldn't bear the thought of doing so and finding the ball to be warm. I should have just gone home, but instead, I headed up the stairs. The first floor, the infant level, and then to the toddler's rooms on the second floor. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing misplaced, lights working fine. The third floor, however, was anything but. Ascending the stairs, I felt a significant drop in the temperature between the floors. The third floor was freezing, and there was a strange smell, one that had never been there before, like a shoreline, a rotten one. A sandy, salty, rotten, marine life smell. The thermostat on the corridor read 28 degrees. This was the constant room temperature setting for the entire building. It could not be increased either. Inside the 4-year-old's room was even colder. I could see plumes of steam in front of me every time I exhaled, but I noticed no condensation on the windows. And then I heard the same noise as I had on the first floor. A bouncing ball, this time too, was getting close. It was bouncing up the stairs. Some impulse told me to conceal myself from the view of the stairwell opposite the room. I pressed my back against the wall next to the room's door. The ball bounced into the room, past where I was standing flat against the wall. It stopped at a spot in the center of the room, still bouncing. It gradually slowed until it stopped and came to a rest on the floor. I could do nothing other than stand and watch. What would you have done if that had happened to you? There isn't much else you can do. There was a terrible passing of time, a heavily pregnant pause in the air. The wall at my back threatened to freeze me. The cold was now both in the room and inside myself. After a few minutes, maybe even 10, the ball started to slowly roll towards me. Again, it stopped just before my toes. I was frozen with fear and disbelief, like I was in someone else's nightmare, being forced to experience it without having control over when I could wake up. As carefully as I could, I slid along the small space of the wall at my back towards the door. The ball remained motionless. I felt that if I made any sudden, quick movements, it would spring to life again. Out in the corridor, I became immediately aware of him. A small boy, perhaps 5 years old, stood naked save for a pair of white underwear. He was very pale, his skin almost gray. His eyes were very much alive, and they stared mutely at me. He was definitely a physical being. But it was the marks on his body that, to this day, make my blood chill when I recall them. Around either side of his neck, long, blue and black bruises, 4 on each side. His stomach was crisscrossed with what looked like burn scars from something thin and long. The corner of one of his great lips was swollen and black. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound as casual as I could. I know how silly it must seem now, but trust me, at the time, I thought him real. Real as in physically there. Tangible. The apparition, because I know that's what it was now, stared blankly at me. "Why are you still here?" I asked, injecting as much caring into my voice as possible, while trying not to turn tail and run for as long as I could. His skin was so pale, and his eyes exhausted, sunken but definitely regarding me. From behind me, the hall telephone rang. Startled, I swung around, and when I turned back, the boy had disappeared. The ball inside of the room was gone too. The phone continued to ring on the wall. I couldn't say what sick impulse spurred me to answer the phone, but I picked it up. A part of me knew what I was likely to hear. Sure enough,
"Is my son there?"
that same voice.
I want you to give me my son.
Excuse me? I asked, not really expecting a reply. I looked out the window, overlooking the front gate, hoping to see someone standing by the intercom. There was no one in sight, and the gate was wide open. Slamming the receiver back down, I raced for the stairs. But as I did, I heard the sound of one of the closet doors in the classroom slam shut with terrible force. Was the child back? The room was just as freezing as it had been moments before, and the smell was stronger. I opened the closet door to find the same little boy hiding in one corner, his skinny little legs drawn up to his chest. He looked terrified. "You okay, little guy?" I asked again. From behind me wafted the smell. It was thick, like a current. It nearly made me retch. The boy turned his focus away from me and to the point behind me. He cringed and turned as far into the corner as he could. And then a voice from just behind my back, the exact same as the one on the phone. It sounded close but had that same watery distortion as on the intercom phone.
Give him to me.
Every hair in my body stood on end. I turned around. I was facing a woman. Well, what was once a woman, I imagine. Before her current, how should I put it, state. She was soaked, her hair matted in thick strands which stuck to her face. Her skin, what could be seen of it anyway through her clothing, was as pale as the boy's. It was wrinkled, silvery, like the belly of a fish. She slowly opened her mouth. Inside I could see a swollen black tongue. Her teeth were caked in something green and slimy looking. Her mouth didn't move though. I heard the same line as before coming from somewhere inside that moldy sewer pipe mouth. And then a thick green-black ooze spilled slowly from it. I could smell it. I retched. And then from behind me in the closet, the boy let out a scream. It was full of panic and fear. It was as if my body had completely rejected what I was experiencing. Acting out of pure instinct, I sprang up and scrambled across the room, slipping on my own vomit. The boy's screams continued as I raced down the steps and out the front gate. I could still hear them as I sped off in my car. I spent the night in my car. I don't know why. Perhaps because it was a small space and I could escape easily. I sat in the driver's seat until dawn, vainly trying to process what had just happened. Should I call the police? Should I go back and check on the boy? Should I call my boss? The answer to all of those questions was, of course, no. In the morning, I told my boss that I wouldn't be coming in again, citing family reasons. He was sympathetic and strangely accommodating, as if he had expected this all along. As an afterthought, I asked him if there had ever been an incident at the school involving a parent and one of the kids. I figured that I've already resigned, so what difference does it make? He said there was only one incident that he knows of. It didn't happen in the school though. One of the kids, he said, was found dead in their home one day. God, I said. He continued. This boy would turn up to school with bruises, cuts, and other obvious signs of physical abuse. I think he was also deprived of food because he was much skinnier than the other kids. Was he murdered? I asked. He nodded and looked pointedly at me. The mother. She strangled him. Christ. I felt sick. She was questioned by the police, but she killed herself a few hours after being released. She drowned. The cowardly lady jumped into the river. They should have let her body rot in the water after what she did. His phone rang and that ended our conversation, but I had already heard enough. That boy is still constantly on my mind. I can still hear his screams from the night that I fled. The only conclusion that I can come to is that his spirit inhabits the preschool that he attended. Perhaps he's hiding from his mother there. But as I found out, his mother knows where he is, and she comes back for him. Does that mean that he must relive his death at the hands of that wretched woman over and over? It's a horrible thought. And did he manifest himself to me in order to seek my help? I would love nothing more than to put his soul to rest, but I'll need help.